All right, so you're here because you want to really get down to the nuts and bolts of Salesforce, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe you're prepping for like the ADM 201 exam or something like that. Or, hey, maybe you just want to kind of wrap your head around like how this whole platform works, you know?
Right.
Either way, you've come to the right place because today we are going deep.
Deep dive.
Yeah, a serious deep dive into the absolute core of what makes Salesforce tick.
That's right. And we've got a great roadmap for this journey, too.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to be working with essentially a super concentrated list of like the must-know definitions for anyone looking to become a true Salesforce admin. You know?
Yeah, it's like the essential Salesforce vocabulary cheat sheet or something.
Exactly.
And our goal here isn't to like bury you in a mountain of tech jargon or anything.
Oh, no.
We want to make all these kind of abstract ideas and terms super clear.
Yeah, we want you to come away from this with like a rock-solid foundation of understanding.
Exactly. And I think a good place to start is with the basic building blocks.
Yeah.
Like the organizations and the people you're going to be working with in Salesforce.
Sounds good.
So at the very heart of Salesforce, you have the account.
Right.
So think of an account as basically any company, any client, any organization that you're either doing business with or that you just want to track information about.
Right. It's like the central hub for all your interactions with a particular entity.
Gotcha. So like under the umbrella of an account,
Yep.
you'd have individual people that you're actually talking to.
And that's where the contact comes in.
Contact. Okay.
Exactly. A contact is a specific person linked to a particular account.
Right. So for instance, within, let's say, Global Innovations, Inc.,
Okay.
you might have several contacts like the CEO, the marketing manager, maybe a dedicated support contact or something, all under that one account.
Precisely.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, before someone becomes a contact at an account, they often start out as something else first, right?
Right. Often they'll begin as a lead.
A lead, okay.
You think of a lead as a potential customer, someone who's expressed interest but isn't quite a formal account in your system yet.
They're like on the hook but not fully reeled in.
Exactly. You're hoping to convert them.
Gotcha. So then when things start looking good with the lead and a sale might be on the horizon.
That's when we start talking about an opportunity.
Opportunity, okay.
Yeah, an opportunity represents a potential sale that you're actively working on.
All right, so it's like it's graduated from being just a lead.
Right. It's got potential. It usually has like a projected value attached to it and maybe an estimated closing date.
Okay, now I think this is where things get really interesting because, you know, if you're really diligent about tracking the different stages of an opportunity,
Absolutely.
From that very first contact all the way through to, you know, like the final negotiations.
All of it.
Yeah, you can get some incredibly valuable insights into your whole sales pipeline.
Yeah, you can start to identify those potential roadblocks early. You can forecast your revenue much more accurately, and ultimately you can make smarter business decisions.
So it's not just about like logging the sale, it's about understanding the whole journey.
Precisely.
Very cool. All right, so moving on. Now let's talk about how you interact with your customers.
Okay.
Because that's obviously crucial for any business, right?
Right.
So when a customer runs into a problem or just needs some help, you usually log that interaction as a case in Salesforce.
Right. A case is basically your customer support ticket.
Okay.
It's a record of the problem, what happened, and how it was ultimately resolved.
Gotcha. And once you figure out how to resolve a case, you don't want your team to have to reinvent the wheel every single time that same issue comes up, right?
Right, exactly. And that's where a solution comes in handy.
Solution.
Yeah, think of a solution as a documented answer, like a step-by-step guide or a helpful explanation for a specific problem.
It's like your knowledge base for common customer issues.
Exactly. It makes case management way more efficient and really empowers your support team.
Makes sense now before a customer even needs to log a case. Businesses often try to reach out and connect with potential customers through various marketing initiatives.
And that's where a Salesforce campaign comes into play.
Campaign.
Yeah. A campaign is a specific marketing effort. It could be anything from an email blast to like an online ad push, or even just tracking attendance at an industry event.
Okay.
All of these activities can be managed and tracked as a campaign in Salesforce.
So it's like a way to organize and measure the effectiveness of your marketing efforts.
Exactly.
All right. So we've talked about the organizations, we've talked about the people, and we've even touched on some ways you interact with them.
Right.
Now let's shift gears a little bit and talk about some of the day-to-day actions that keep things moving in Salesforce.
Okay.
So the most basic of these is a task.
Right. A task is basically an action item.
Okay.
It's a to-do list entry that's assigned to a specific user in Salesforce.
So it could be anything from making a follow-up call to like prepping a presentation.
Yep. Any action item that needs to get done.
Okay. And for scheduling those all-important meetings and appointments.
We have events.
Events, all right.
Yeah, an event is basically a calendar entry in Salesforce.
Okay.
It has a set date, a set time, and you can link it directly to accounts, contacts, opportunities.
So it keeps all your related activities nice and organized. So these are like the fundamental entities in Salesforce, right?
Yeah, the who, the what, and the why of your business.
I like that. All right. So now let's get into how all this important information is actually structured and how you can really visualize it within the platform.
Okay. Sounds good.
So at the most fundamental level, you've got objects.
Right.
Now, an object is essentially like a table in a database.
Okay.
It's where you store all the data that's of a similar type.
Right. So like we've already talked about some of these standard objects like account and contact.
Right. That come built into Salesforce.
Exactly.
Now, when you have a specific instance of that object, so like a specific company or a specific person.
That's a record.
A record.
Yeah. So if Bright Future Technology is an account.
Okay.
The entry that holds all their specific details, like their address, their industry, their main contacts, that's a record within the account object.
Gotcha. And then within each of those records, you have the individual pieces of information.
And that's a field.
A field.
Right. Think of a field like a single column in that database table.
Okay.
So for an account record, you might have fields for things like the account new billing address, the annual revenue, even their industry.
Okay, so that's how the data is broken down.
Right.
Now, I know Salesforce provides a bunch of these pre-built structures like the standard objects we've been talking about.
Yeah, you've got accounts, contacts, opportunities, leads, all ready to go right out of the box.
But the really cool thing is that you can create your own custom objects.
Exactly. You're not limited to those standard ones.
Okay, so you can tailor it to your specific business.
Precisely. So let's say you're a real estate company. You might create a custom object called property to track details about all the different properties you manage.
Makes sense. And just like with the objects, you've got standard fields that come included with those standard objects.
Right. Things like the name field on a contact or the close date on an opportunity.
But then you also have the option to create custom fields.
Right. And you can add those to both standard and custom objects.
So you can capture those really specific data points that matter most to you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So for your property custom object, you might add custom fields for things like number of bedrooms, square footage, or listing price.
Perfect. So you've got all this data all organized in Salesforce.
Yep.
Now, naturally, you're going to want to actually work with this data, right? Like derive insights and stuff.
Right. And a formula field is a really powerful tool for that.
Formula field. Okay. Yeah.
Now, a formula field lets you automatically calculate values based on data in other fields within the same record.
So you don't have to do it manually?
Right. So, for example, on an opportunity, you could create a formula field that automatically calculates the potential commission based on the amount field and a predefined commission rate.
So it does the math for you?
Exactly. It updates dynamically whenever the underlying data changes too.
Very cool. And I imagine you also want to make sure that the data that you and your team are putting into Salesforce is accurate and consistent.
Oh, absolutely. And for that, we use validation rules.
Validation rules. Okay.
Yeah. A validation rule is basically a set of criteria that a record has to meet before it can be saved.
So it's like a safety net.
Exactly.
Yeah.
For example, you could have a validation rule that requires the email field to be filled in before a new lead can be saved.
So it forces people to enter complete information.
Right. It helps enforce data quality.
Makes sense. So now you've got all this data nicely structured and you've got ways to ensure its accuracy, but how do you actually make sense of it all?
Well, that's where reports, dashboards, and list views come into play.
Okay, hit me with it.
A report is basically a customizable summary of your Salesforce data.
Okay.
You can filter the data, you can group it in meaningful ways, and you can even perform calculations to get the specific insights you need.
So you could run a report to see like the total value of opportunities closing this month broken down by sales rep.
Exactly.
Okay, that's powerful. Now, what about dashboards?
A dashboard is like your executive overview.
Okay.
It's a collection of multiple reports displayed together, usually using charts and graphs and other visuals.
So you can get a quick snapshot of your key performance indicators.
Exactly. It's like a pilot's control panel.
I like that analogy. And lastly, what about list views?
A list view lets you see a focused subset of records that meets certain criteria.
Okay.
So instead of looking at every single account in your system, you might create a list view to see only high priority accounts or accounts in the education sector.
So it helps you zero in on the data that's most relevant at any given time.
Exactly.
So you've got your data structured, you've got ways to visualize it and understand it. Now, what about making Salesforce automatically handle some of those routine tasks?
Yes, automation. This is where things get really fun.
Okay, tell me more.
At its most basic, you've got the workflow rule.
Workflow rule, all right.
A workflow rule lets you set up simple automated actions like sending an email alert when a big opportunity is created or automatically updating a field on a record.
So it's like setting up little triggers.
Exactly.
Okay, but for more complex automations.
Salesforce has you covered with tools like Process Builder and Flow.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of those.
These are more visually driven tools. They let you build these intricate multi-step business processes with branching logic and all sorts of conditions.
So you can automate some pretty sophisticated workflows.
Absolutely, and you don't even have to write any code.
That's impressive. Now, what about when you need to get formal approval for something like a discount on a sale?
For that, you'd use an approval process.
An approval process.
Yeah, it automates the steps of routing a record to the right people for review and approval.
So it keeps the process organized and transparent?
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got automation covered now. Let's talk about what happens when, like, new potential customers or support inquiries come into your system.
Right. You want to make sure they're directed to the right team or the right person as quickly as possible.
Right, so no one falls through the cracks.
Exactly. And that's where assignment rules come in.
Assignment rules.
An assignment rule automatically routes new, leads to specific sales reps, or assigns new cases to the right support queues.
So it's based on predefined criteria.
Right, like the customer's location or the product they're interested in.
Okay, and to make sure that customer support issues are addressed quickly.
We've got escalation rules.
Escalation rules.
These rules automatically escalate cases to higher level support people if they haven't been resolved within a certain time frame.
Smart. So it helps you meet those service level agreements and keep your customers happy.
Exactly.
Now, what about just acknowledging a customer's inquiry right away?
Well, for that, you've got auto response rules.
Auto response rules.
These let you automatically send confirmation emails when someone submits a new lead form on your website or logs a support case.
So it lets them know you've received their inquiry.
Exactly. And it sets those expectations for next steps.
So automation is really about streamlining those processes and improving the overall customer experience.
Absolutely. It makes things happen behind the scenes seamlessly.
All right, so let's switch gears again and talk about how users actually interact with Salesforce on a daily basis.
Okay, so we're talking about the user experience now.
Yeah.
You'll often hear people talking about Lightning Experience and Salesforce Classic.
Right.
These are the two main user interfaces offered by Salesforce.
Okay, so what's the difference?
Lightning is the newer, more modern interface.
Okay.
It's got a more streamlined design and some enhanced features.
And Classic is like the original version?
Right, the one that's been around longer.
Gotcha. Now, how is the information actually presented within these interfaces?
Well, that's largely controlled by page layouts.
Page layouts. Okay.
A page layout determines which fields-related lists and buttons are visible on a record page and how they're arranged.
So you can customize the layout for different user roles?
Exactly. Make sure everyone sees the information that's most relevant to their job.
And for a quick overview of the most critical information,
You've got the compact layout.
compact layout.
Yeah, it displays a handful of key fields prominently at the top of the record page so users can quickly get the gist of things.
Without having to dig through the whole page.
Exactly.
Now, if you want even more control over the look and feel,
There's the Lightning App Builder.
Lightning App Builder.
This is a really powerful drag and drop tool. You can create custom record pages, app home pages, even standalone app pages, all without any coding.
So it's all about tailoring the experience to maximize productivity.
Exactly.
All right, so we've talked about customization, we've talked about the user interface, but none of that matters if you can't control who can see what and do what within Salesforce.
Right. Security is absolutely crucial.
So let's dive into that a bit.
Okay, so the foundation of user permissions in Salesforce is the profile.
Profile.
A profile defines what a user can see and what they can do within the platform.
So it controls access to objects, fields, even administrative functions?
Exactly. It sets their baseline capabilities.
Okay, but what if you need to grant users additional permissions beyond their assigned profile?
That's where permission sets come in.
Permission sets.
Yeah, you can use them to grant extra access to specific features or functionality without having to create a whole new profile.
So it's a more granular way to manage user privileges.
Exactly.
Now, what about controlling access to specific records?
Well, for that, you've got roles and sharing rules.
Okay, break those down for me.
A role basically defines a user's position within your organization's hierarchy.
Okay.
And it plays a big part in determining who can see what data, especially in terms of who can see data owned by people below them in the hierarchy.
Okay, so it's about maintaining that order.
Right. And then sharing rules lets you extend record access to users who wouldn't normally have it based on certain criteria.
So you might create a sharing rule to allow the whole marketing team to see all the opportunities related to their campaigns.
Exactly.
Okay, and then to make sharing and collaboration even easier.
You've got public groups and queues.
Okay, tell me about those.
Public groups are collections of users' roles, even other public groups.
Okay.
They make it easy to grant access to multiple people at once.
And what about queues?
Queues are like shared holding areas for records.
Okay.
So new leads or open support cases can be put in a queue, and then anyone on the team can grab them and work on them.
So it streamlines teamwork and keeps things organized.
Exactly.
All right, so you've got your Salesforce org set up, users are in, processes are running smoothly, but what about expanding its capabilities or connecting it with other systems?
Well, that's where the AppExchange comes in.
AppExchange.
Yeah, it's Salesforce's online marketplace for third-party apps and integrations.
So it's like an app store specifically for Salesforce.
Exactly. You can find all sorts of pre-built solutions to extend the functionality of your Salesforce environment.
And these usually come as either managed packages or unmanaged packages.
Right. A managed package is typically developed and supported by the company that created it.
Okay.
And it usually includes mechanisms for easy upgrades.
And what about unmanaged packages?
An unmanaged package gives you the full source code so you can customize it however you want.
Okay, but no easy upgrade path.
Right.
Now let's talk about developing and testing new customizations.
Okay.
You don't want to do that directly in your live production environment, right?
Oh, no, that would be risky.
So what do?
You use a sandbox.
Sandbox.
A sandbox is basically a copy of your production org that you can use for development and testing.
So it's like a safe space to experiment.
Exactly.
Now, I know there are different types of sandboxes, right?
Yeah, you've got developer sandboxes, which are great for individual coding. Then you have partial copy sandboxes, which include some of your production data for more thorough testing.
And then there are full sandboxes, which are a complete replica of your production environment.
Exactly. Those are ideal for like final user acceptance testing.
Makes sense now. Once you've developed and tested your changes in a sandbox, how do you get them into your live org?
You use change sets.
Change set.
Yeah, you can select specific customizations in your sandbox and deploy them to another environment.
So it's like a controlled transfer.
Precisely.
Now, what about when you need to get a lot of data into or out of Salesforce?
Well, for that, you'd use tools like Data Loader or Data Import Wizard.
Okay, I've heard of Data Loader.
Data Loader is a more powerful app designed for bulk data operations, like inserting, updating, or deleting large numbers of records.
And Data Import Wizard is a bit simpler?
Right. It's more user-friendly for importing data into standard and custom objects.
Okay. And to get data out of Salesforce?
You can do a data export, which
Yeah.
usually gives you CSV files.
Handy. And if you accidentally delete some important records?
Don't worry, Salesforce has a recycle bin.
Oh, thank goodness.
Deleted records hang out there for a while before they're permanently gone.
So you've got a chance to recover them.
Exactly.
Now let's touch on a few more technical concepts just briefly.
Right.
Often you'll want Salesforce to talk to other systems in your business.
Right, and that's where the API comes in. The application programming interface. It's like a universal translator that lets different software applications share information.
So your Salesforce data can integrate with your accounting system, your marketing platform, all that stuff.
Exactly.
Now, when you need to find specific information within Salesforce...
You can use query languages like SOQL.
SOQL?
Salesforce Object Query Language. It's how you retrieve data from your Salesforce database in a structured way.
Kind of like SQL for regular databases.
Right.
And then for more flexible text-based searches.
You've got SOSL, Salesforce Object Search Language.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like a global search tool that can quickly find records based on keywords.
Very cool. Now, I know Salesforce has something called governor limits.
Right, because Salesforce is a multi-tenant platform. Meaning lots of different organizations are all sharing the same underlying infrastructure.
Okay.
So governor limits are basically system-imposed restrictions to make sure no single organization hogs all the resources.
So it's about ensuring fairness and stability for everyone.
Exactly.
Now, let's not forget about collaboration.
Right. Teamwork makes the dream work.
Salesforce has this built-in social networking tool called Chatter.
Yeah, users can communicate with each other, share files, ask questions, collaborate in real time.
It's all about boosting teamwork and knowledge sharing.
Exactly.
And for anyone who wants to learn more about Salesforce,
Trailhead is the place to go.
Trail!
It's Salesforce's free interactive learning platform.
Okay.
They've got tons of modules, projects, trails that make learning about Salesforce fun and engaging.
So there's no excuse not to keep learning.
Absolutely.
All right, so we've covered a ton of ground here.
We have.
Understanding these core Salesforce definitions is really the foundation for anyone who wants to use the platform effectively.
It's the essential vocabulary.
Right. This deep dive has given you a solid understanding of the key terms and concepts.
But it's just the beginning.
Yeah, so I want you to think about this.
Okay.
Considering all these core components, the way data is structured, how you can automate processes, how users interact with the system, what specific business challenge do you see Salesforce potentially solving for you or your organization?
That's a great question to ponder.
It is, and we encourage you to take this knowledge and keep exploring.
Dive deeper into those areas that really piqued your interest.
Yeah, maybe spend some time on Trailhead, get some hands-on experience.
There's a whole world of Salesforce knowledge out there waiting to be discovered.
Exactly. All right, that's it for our deep dive today. Thanks for joining us.
It was a pleasure.
And remember, keep exploring, keep learning, and we'll see you next time.
See you then.